So here we go, the inaugural edition of the Inside Connection podcast. Not our first foray when it comes to, being on a media outlet where we're trying to, engage with a lot of consumers all at once. But first time we're on video doing podcast and, trying to deliver content in different ways to, again, more people who could potentially benefit. So I think to start it all off, we should start, by introducing the very brand we represent, which is MediConnect. So how do we break that down layer by layer? Who is MediConnect and why are we here doing this at this level?
Yeah, so it's amazing how media kind of changes at the speed of light, right? We've been doing radio for a while. We're seeing a greater need, through Facebook and other avenues, YouTube, where people are really wanting to be able to see the content, right? So, MediConnect is the top rated advisory firm in the state of Pennsylvania. We're a brokerage. What that means is we work with all the carriers, right? We're not beholden to one carrier, but our focus is on education and on relationship. We want to make sure people understand how Medicare works, right? So they can make great decisions for themselves. And we want to provide that ongoing service because, again, much like myself, I like using the same mechanic every time I have a car issue because I found somebody that I trust, right? I found somebody that I know is going to tell me what I need to understand and then let me make the choice on what bill I want to pay, if you will. And that's really how we operate, is through that education, because it's incredibly confusing, and that relationship that really brings things full circle for someone.
And it's really interesting too, Lance. By the way, Lance O'Brien, company CEO, who has really spearheaded the charge over the last few years when it comes to making sure the relationship is the primary focus when engaging with our clientele. But what's also interesting is the fact that we're able to do this all for free.
Yeah, it's awesome, isn't it?
Some of the best things in life are free, right?
I wish my mechanic bills, going back to that illustration, were always free, but it doesn't work out that way.
Doesn't, unfortunately. But when it comes to Medicare advice, something that we're happy to provide day in and day out. When it comes to Medicare, we have these calendar events that we have to abide by when it goes to helping people through the process. And, end of the year, which we'll get into in later shows, we're usually really, really busy during that time. Yeah. Well, what's funny is ever since our boom, from a few years back, we really picked it up every single day where we're helping numerous people through this very confusing process, unfortunately. And because the show, I actually was just doing a seminar out in Cranberry for those in our local audience here, suburb a little north of Pittsburgh.
Right.
Had about 20 people attend a new to Medicare seminar, and one of the greatest questions asked of me during the seminar, which is one that I waited my entire career for. It was like a fastball coming right down Broadway, right? And I swung as hard as I could, and I feel like I foul tipped it. I didn't give, because I was just so excited for the question. And really what it comes down to is, why MediConnect?
Yeah.
There's 80 different companies trying to engage with me right now. Why am I going to pick you as the company that I want to work with? And I think first and foremost, it comes down to the fact that we're really trying to put ourselves out there in ways that other agencies, as well as even the insurance companies, really aren't doing at a high level, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. I think, we're really trying to flip the switch on how this is done. But again, we're holding to, I think, really important values, which is what we always want to do, what's right for the customer, right? We always want to make sure at the end of the day that they're not being sold something, they're being brought into a place where they can make a great decision.
And really, the whole adage of knowledge is power.
Yeah.
That's really what I think we want to focus in on hardcore, because, when we have an educated consumer base that we can help through the process, it really comes down to, even pushing the market more in the Medicare beneficiary's favor. Because, again, going back just even 5 years, there was a bit of a struggle going on in our local market here where two organizations didn't want to work together all that well. Yeah. We got on the radio, started talking about it quite a bit, right? And then at that time, you saw the market kind of shift to where the consumers were getting the power.
Yeah, and it's funny because when we started that show, we were kind of like, well, do people really want to have a radio show about Medicare, right? Because it's kind of a tough listen, right? It's kind of something that you wouldn't think it's overly exciting, right, that can't be really talked about that regularly. But what we found over the last 4 or 5 years is that there's a lot of interest in this subject, that yes, insurance can be boring, but the importance of it in people's lives makes it something that's actually highly interesting to them.
And especially because when people are entering into Medicare, generally speaking, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they're transitioning from their work life. You know, and during your working years, you have somebody who works in HR, you have your organization to the side that's handling your 401k and IRAs and everything like that. And yet, here we are, whenever you're getting into retirement, they throw you out of a plane with a parachute that, it's a crapshoot if it's going to work, right?
Yes.
You're all on your own when it comes to figuring out your health care, your retirement planning, and everything else. And look, if we could take the onus of such a very, it's one of the most critical decisions you can make in retirement. If we could take that weight off of your shoulders, it's really a win for us as well, to be able to put our head on our pillows at night knowing we have done a fantastic job for the people we're meeting with.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I'm sitting here thinking, it's kind of like, I don't mind cooking, but there's a whole lot more work to go into cooking. And when you really want to become a great cook, it's a science, right? Whereas I can go out to eat at a restaurant and it's all put right in front of me and it's like, wow, that was a great meal. And, I kind of connect that to what you were just saying, really, is, with no HR, right? They're really responsible now for cooking the whole meal, right? They've got to go find all the ingredients. They've got to make sure that they put everything together correctly, right? And that's really what we do, is we act as, if you will, the HR, where we do all the homework. But the great thing is we don't do it somewhere in a back room. We do it across the table from them. We do it on the phone with them from our call center. Like, we do it in a way through the seminars where they're watching it unfold, and the information that's being put, they can ask questions in real time. And I think it's actually, the transparency of the process is really helpful for the individual.
And so we talk about how confusing Medicare is all by itself, but then not only is it confusing, but it's such a need area because of how many people are impacted by it. There was a recent report that it's almost now 11,000 people per day turning 65 years of age, which is usually the first signifier of when you're able to get onto Medicare. So almost 11,000 people per day, which equates to roughly 64 million people right now that are on Medicare.
Yeah.
It's the second biggest spend of our federal government. And with all of that, the lobbyists and everyone else who's trying to get a piece of that giant pie, and how many people are impacted by it, and the money that's all involved, there's a lot of misinformation that could be put out there in order to try to swing things one way or another. And that's something we're pretty adamant against.
Yeah, there's misinformation, and sometimes that comes from good sources, right? Because you're going to get your family, your friends, your coworkers are going to say, well, this is what I read, or this is what I've heard. And we've been doing this long enough to kind of know that a lot of times it doesn't resonate, because there's not one hard and set fast rule for pretty much every aspect of Medicare. There's different things that actually go into that decision-making process. The type of coverage I have, right? The amount of employees that are in my specific company, right? That there's not just here's the key, turn it, you're on to Medicare, right? There's a lot of keys on the ring, and you got to kind of go through them. And again, that's what we really try to do, is simplify that process and take all the information, because they're going to get bombarded with phone calls, those 11,000 people a day. They're going to get bombarded with mail. They're going to have stacks. They're going to get the Bible, if you will, of Medicare, the Medicare and You book, which is not really that simple to understand. And they're going to receive all of that. And then it's going to be how to process that into something that now I have what is best for me. And to have a resource that walks through that entire process, I think, is just incredibly helpful.
To talk about the Medicare and You booklet again, referring back to the seminar that I did up in Cranberry, the same gentleman who lobbed me that very nice question, he also informed me of the fact that he read through that 140-page booklet, and he said he left out of the reading more confused than when he went into it. And myself, I'm Sean Horn, been active with this for the last 12 years of my life, and A few weeks back, I actually took the time to read 10 pages, and by the end of it, I had a splitting headache. I mean, and this is literally, one of the most painstaking processes you can endure because, again, the material that's coming to you, the phone calls that are happening, you say it all the time where when you turn 64 years of age, you've never been more popular in your life.
Yeah.
Break that down. What does that mean?
Well, again, I mean, I referenced it a few moments ago, but there are a lot of people that want to talk to you at that point in time, right? And again, it's good and it's bad. It's good if you find people that really have your best interest in heart, right? But people are gonna want to walk you through the process. And I think, what's the aim of this show really, Sean? And the aim of what we do as a company, what are we hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so I think, again, the name of the show being the Inside Connection, we really want to take people into the boardroom where some major discussions are happening when it comes to the Medicare industry, especially in our local market here in Pittsburgh and the surrounding communities, because, again, this is a hotbed, locally speaking. And again, this is something that everybody could benefit from, no matter where you're listening from, as it relates to Medicare, because everybody's going to be impacted by it in one way or another. And what we really try to do is drown out all the extra noise that you don't really have to pay attention to, but really simplify all of the information down in a way that you can digest it. And then from there, you can make a very confident decision relating to coverage that is not going to shortcut you. But also, at the same time, Lance, we want to make sure you're paying as little as possible for your insurance. Because, again, I think that it's pretty powerful to say that we think that all these insurance companies have plenty of money. Right. Nothing against them. They do good things and offer great coverages and everything. But when we're dealing with retirement, we're trying to stretch dollars as far as we possibly can, especially with everything else that's happening with inflation and gas and eggs and everything else that's, bothering people in their everyday lives.
Yeah, and the thing of it is there's the thinking that we generally have, you get what you pay for. And we think we have to pay a ton of money to get something that's really good. And the truth of it is especially if you've been on like the Affordable Care Act and through your, maybe you're self-employed or maybe you retired early and you're paying a lot just to get halfway decent coverage. When you go onto Medicare, you don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get great coverage, right? So we're really trying to take people through the process of understanding what Medicare is, right? Connecting it to them personally, helping them understand the cost processes for the original Medicare, the private insurance, and bringing it down into a place where they can really make an informed decision that they feel confident about and then know they have a trusted source moving forward.
Yeah, and we're going to take a quick break, kind of get you, a little more acclimated to who MediConnect is. And when we do come back, we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into how we can help people individually.
Sounds good.
And welcome back to the Inside Connection podcast powered by MediConnect. Thrilled to be here. My name is Sean Horn, joined by my good friend Lance O'Brien. And, as we kind of unravel what it exactly is to be in the Inside Connection, I think we owe it to our audience to kind of break it down by layer even further on how we operate so that the people who engage with us can really understand Medicare to a level that really they can follow along with. And, we are big on the word simple, simplified, taking information and making it in a way that my 9-year-old daughter could understand it, right? And you're pretty passionate about the idea that, sometimes the jargon doesn't work. And, we don't want to put the information on whiteboards and bore you to death with all the numbers and everything. But also the jargon can be just as painful.
Yeah, I took public speaking in college, right? And I know one of the things they said is put it on a level where it's really easily understandable, right? And I think one of the things that happens over time, and I spent a lot of years teaching and doing things of that, and sorry, my nose is itching a little bit. I guess that happens, right? That's human, right? One of the things over time that I really learned was we think if somebody's speaks super intelligent about something, like they have all these really flashy words and whatever, that they're an expert on the topic. I actually think it's the opposite. I think someone's an expert on it when they can take really complex issues, and there are complex issues in Medicare. IRMA, right? Yeah. Even the sign-up process, the networks and how they build and
penalties.
The effects, the penalties, all of that stuff. I think somebody's an expert on an issue when they can put it in the simplest terms. My mom used to have a saying when I was growing up, we put the cookies on the lower shelf so everybody can grab them, right? And that's really the approach that we take in the individual appointments and the dissemination, there's a big word, right, of information on the radio and podcast. But what we're really trying to do is let's get this on a level where everybody's like, that makes sense, right? Because I think people can embrace things that make sense.
And really, if you go to Google MediConnect, you'll see review after review after review talking about how without the process in which we have, this would be so much more difficult of a outlay for the people we talk to. And again, this is a system that is kind of set up in a way where here you are during your working years, you have your benefits coordinator who puts 2 to 3 different plans in front of you and says, pick one you like.
Yeah.
Generally, when that comes into my life on a personal level and I have to pick my plan, I pick the one that I think we can afford best. The coverage is okay, and I just hope I don't have to use it, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we get to Medicare, that isn't the case. We're probably a little bit more likely to use that coverage. So we don't want any shortcuts.
Can't cheat Father Time, right?
You can't. And not only can you not cheat Father Time, you can't cheat your coverage at the same time. Because if something terrible happens or tragic even, that it's going to be a long rehab, and you don't want that to burn away at all your life savings that you acquired to get to this point to enjoy a comfortable retirement. So when we're talking about Medicare, it can impact so many different pieces of your retirement planning that if you do make a mistake, unfortunately, it can be detrimental to everything, your entire portfolio.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's why we really try to start early with people, right? In that process when we are talking about our seminars or even individual appointments, if someone doesn't want to go to one of our seminars, we're talking about that 12-month window. Why is that 12-month window so important, and what are we trying to accomplish during that time frame?
Okay, well, let's start off with the fact that the government moves slow.
Yes, that's true.
So, we need to make sure that you're hitting proper timelines through your journey to make sure that, when your initial enrollment period comes, again, it's something we'll talk about in later shows, when this period of time comes, when it's time for you to enroll, that window is open where you have plenty of opportunity to pick from and there's no chance of penalization. Well, again, because the government is the puppet master behind all of this planning for you, we need to get out in front of this as soon as we possibly can. Not only that, but I think it's also worth talking about the fact that we will come into contact with people at that age range that don't need Medicare.
Right. Yeah, so we want to help people build that timeline, right, of kind of making the step through. But we also know that some people who turn 65 don't necessarily need Medicare at that point in time. And people listening right now might be like, well, I thought everybody who turned 65 needed Medicare, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we see more people working longer, right? And that's going to impact that decision. And sometimes they're going to have group coverage available in that scenario, but they shouldn't always just go with the group coverage. But to your point, we help them not only understand a timeline, but if they're even really a candidate who should remain with their group coverage or if they should go to Medicare. And what I love is we can make it an apples to apples.
Yep.
People would think it's two different types of insurance. We can't really find synergy, right? Connection there, right? But we can do an apples to apples comparison. There's also going to be cost considerations, right?
For sure. I mean, so let's, you're famous on our radio show for saying when it comes to your group benefits during your working years, you have one of two things in front of you. You have either really good coverage or maybe coverage that's not so good, you just don't know any better.
Right.
One of the biggest things that we like to take into consideration when it comes to that type of planning is your deductible. Oftentimes when you go to use your coverage, you have to go through a spend before your insurance kicks in. That right there may be more expensive than what you would pay for Medicare in its totality. So if that's the case, we want to look at that for you. And really, we break it down line by line, what you're going to pay at the doctor, hospital, prescriptions, as you use your health care, some other odds and ends that you may have access to through your coverage. And then at that point, this is probably the thing I love most about our company, is the fact that we're going to determine if we can help you. And then at that point, you're going to let us know if you even want our help.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, right? Again, our goal is not to get people onto Medicare, right?
No.
Our goal is to get people in a position to make smart, informed decisions. And sometimes that is going to be you're continuing working, stay on your group coverage because that makes more sense. You have a spouse you have to be considered about. We want to help you take that into consideration, right? So it's not just simply, we see someone's turning 65, we want to get them on a Medicare plan. It's bringing that year time frame and building timeline, cost, expectations, whether it's even the right thing, and really helping people. We were talking a few minutes ago about how we've walked through this process, and I was thinking at the time, and as you were just talking, I've never had someone come up to me and say, or call me and say, I was referred to you, and say, the person that you work with said you were so smart, right? I've never had that scenario where they've been like, man, you're so smart, I was supposed to work with you. You know what I always hear?
You're so helpful.
You were so helpful, you made this so simple, right? That's what people want when they're put in a scenario where they have to engage with something that's totally outside of their realm of experience. They want somebody who's going to make it simple, and I think that's what our whole timeline does.
And, the other thing to take into consideration is the fact that Medicare is extremely individualized.
Yes.
Unlike your working years when you and your spouse had the same plan, you had to go to the same doctor network, access to the same type of co-pays and, coverage options and so forth. When it comes to Medicare, even in the same household, a lot of times, one spouse will go with one plan, another will go with a completely different arrangement because, the prescriptions and how they line up, the doctor network you need to have access to, what you have on the horizon when it comes to your health, and, walking people through that process, because here, and again, just in Allegheny County, we're looking at well north of 80 different options to consider with Medicare.
It's really overwhelming. I remember when I first started doing this, Sean, it might have been my first month, and I went into this person's house, and the lady said to me, I just picked a plan for the very first time, and the broker told me that this was the best plan. But I don't even know what I have or how it works. And I was like, just being very transparent and honest, I was like, there's a best plan. Wow, this is simpler than I thought, right? But as I did some research, I actually realized that nothing could be further from the truth. There's not a singular best plan. There is a lot that goes into that selection process. And lo and behold, that lady I met with, as I started asking her questions about the prescriptions she takes, the plan she was put in, her doctor, she couldn't even see one of her doctors. It was her pain management doctor. And she was like, I went to see him and it was like, we don't accept your insurance. How can that be the best plan for her, right? So we went through a whole series of questions And we really identified for her what was the best option. Now, I've met with her subsequently over the years, and we realized that as time changed, there was another best plan for her based on how the plans changed and her needs changed. So, it's really being able to walk people through that process year over year as they change.
And talking about that, it's pretty interesting that you bring that up at this time because, my own parents have been on Medicare for a little over 4 years now. And again, I'm in this business. I know it, better than most. And every single year they've been on a different plan.
Yep.
Every year, without fail, they have not kept the same plan for more than 2 years. And the reason why is because of how quickly the Medicare market can change on a moment's notice on a yearly basis. I mean, there are some plan developments that come along the way that'll blow your socks off if you're paying attention. The problem is not a lot of people that are in our demographic like change.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately opens people up for the opportunity to be taken advantage of. That is something we're focused in on making sure that isn't your reality when we engage with you. You're not going to be, less susceptible to overpaying for your insurance as long as we're able to help you year in and year out. So, as we kind of wind down this show and, it's been a lot of fun starting out here, and we'll build this out and kind of give you different parts of Medicare to consider and, again, the layman's terms so you can really engage with it. How can people connect if they need help right now with some Medicare questions?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. First one is they can call 888-818-6334. Again, that's 888-818-6334. They can also go to our website, MediConnectInsurance.com. They can be able to connect with us, find out when seminars are. They can fill out a web submission where we would contact them that way. They can follow us on Facebook. What's the address for that?
Yeah, so if you search on Facebook, MediConnect PGH, all one word, you'll find all of our content there. Our weekly radio shows will be there. Podcast will be there. A bunch of other information. And, again, we're going to put all this information on the bottom shelf, as Mom liked to say, right? Put the cookies down there so that as you go through the process of Medicare, you have a team that you can count on to carry you through the finish line.
Yeah, I'm excited. Broad overview today, right? Really looking forward to getting into some of the specifics so that people can get their questions answered. It's going to be a fun ride.
Very much look forward to it. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for the audience tuning in. I'm Sean Horn, Lance O'Brien. We'll look forward to doing this again next week.
Let's do it.